On today's episode of The Angle Show, we're going to be talking about some massive news surrounding a WWE show being canceled and so much more. And it's coming up right here, right now. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Ango. Before we get to the WWE news, and trust me, there's some big ones there, we got to talk about AEW All In. Obviously, there is a lot of excitement about this show. And, well, it's showing in the numbers. So Andrew Zarian of the Mat Men podcast has come out today with a very interesting post on X. And he says AEW All In currently has over 90,000 advanced pay-per-view buys for U.S. domestic orders. Obviously, this is a very strong number. I think we can all agree on that. Especially when you look at the previous pay-per-view buys for AEW pay-per-views, they all kind of tend to sit around 100 to 140,000 roughly, maybe a little bit more depending on the scenario. But this is obviously big news for AEW going into All In. I think there's a lot of intrigue by the fans when it comes to All In, especially now that the construction has started for the stage. It's definitely given off some WrestleMania vibes. But the big thing here that we got to talk about when it comes to the numbers is that we don't know how the show is going to finish. And we also got to keep in mind it is the first All In under the AEW umbrella. And the reason why I want to factor that in and why it's so important to factor that in, I think a lot of people aren't really watching this based on the build, which I've always told you guys, if you watch this channel, you know this. This is not, I mean, this is redundant at this point, but I've always been adamant that like AEW might have a weird, wonky build to their pay-per-views, but ultimately, they do deliver some great matches. And it's funny because I don't know who said this recently, but somebody came out and said Tony Khan is more of a matchmaker than a booker. And I'm starting to feel like that is an accurate statement. And I'll probably do a long think piece on that eventually. But 90,000 days and days before the pay-per-view, before it even goes on air, I think that's a very, very good indicator that there is interest here. My interest in All In has a lot to do with Adam Cole and MJF. I think that's really one of the big things. And I really do enjoy the Swerve storyline that they've done with Sting, Darby, Nick Wayne, Gates of Agony. Like everybody involved in that has been really cool. But other than that, I am struggling to get excited about the actual pay-per-view build. That doesn't mean I don't have interest in All In, but my interest for All In is to see the presentation and to see the iconic moment of 80,000 plus in attendance. Like to me, that's what All In intrigues me. That's why it intrigues me. So very good numbers. Obviously, people are buying the pay-per-view. Now, if AEW makes this a yearly thing, which I think they would be stupid not to, but if they make this a yearly thing, we'll see how impressive it is year over year. But that is definitely something to watch out for. And we'll obviously give you guys an update after the pay-per-view is concluded. How many pay-per-view buys do they actually do? You got to also keep in mind that AEW has All Out literally a week after. So obviously one of them has to take a hit. Curious to see what that number comes in at as well. Let's turn our attention to some WWE news. Becky Lynch. Yeah, this was cool, man. If you guys watched WWE NXT last night, Becky Lynch basically putting out a very, very interesting hint. And then WWE obviously played it on TV. But basically, Becky Lynch came out with a post on X saying, I haven't been NXT Women's Champion yet. Hashtag NXT Heatwave. And WWE's kind of teasing something there with Tiffany Stratton and Becky Lynch, whether or not Becky Lynch will head down to NXT for some cross-brand promoting. First and foremost, I think it's a very crazy statistic. But it's a very crazy statistic because it's true. Becky Lynch was not the NXT Women's Champion. I totally forgot about that. When you look at NXT and the women's division at the time that she was in NXT, it would kind of like, it almost seems like it happened just because of how massive of a star Becky Lynch has become and how prominent she was in NXT when, Sasha, Banks, Bayley, and Charlotte were in there. But it's true. Becky Lynch wasn't the NXT Women's Champion, and now she's kind of putting out that feeler. Obviously, we know Nick Khan has a very, very strong opinion on growing the NXT brand. The NXT brand is growing significantly. The product has been very good, in my opinion. I feel like for the last year, I feel like I've enjoyed it so much more than a lot of other people. But I think what's cool about NXT possibly bringing in Becky Lynch and Tiffany Stratton is you kind of want to test the waters with some of these individuals in NXT. Some of these individuals don't have the most experience. Some of these people have never been on the big stage. Some of these people have never been on TV. Then they go to NXT, they get that opportunity, and they just get a small glimpse of what it could be. But when you put them in the ring with other individuals who are more experienced, it could create for some great content. And I think we saw that a lot with Braun Breaker and Dolph Ziggler. I think we saw that a lot with Grayson Waller and AJ Styles. And now you're starting to see a lot of this stuff happen with Mustafa Ali and Baron Corbin going to NXT and working with a ton of people. I like this strategy. I think it's a good strategy. The only thing that I really want to criticize here is if you're bringing in Becky Lynch to NXT, then at the very least, what you need to do, if they're going to move forward with this feud, I think at the very least, you need to have Becky Lynch not show up back on Raw until her side quest is completed. And the reason for that is because you don't want Becky Lynch involved in two of the top storylines on WWE television when you have other people not being used on Raw. So if Becky Lynch is going to go to NXT, maybe for a month or 2 months or whatever it may be, let somebody else in the meantime get some of that television time on Raw. That would be what I want to see. And then, of course, you could have Tiffany Stratton show up on Raw sometimes too, and that's cool. But the goal is to, try to get as much people on TV as possible and try to give everybody the opportunity to go over at some point. And the women's division is probably the area that needs it the most, at least on WWE Raw. Because when you look at the men's mid-card, you're seeing a lot of new faces, a lot of familiar faces, and that's a good thing. But I think for the women's division, it would be a good move. Guys, I want to turn our attention to some WWE firings. We've talked about this before, but now we're getting closer and closer and closer. PW Insider today reported that there is a sense of gloom and doom within the company's offices, with many employees feeling that if they are not part of the production or involved with WWE talent, then they are not safe, as the company looks to cut back departments that are not needed because of the merger. So we already know Ari Emanuel and Endeavor have basically made it very clear that there are going to be cuts. There are going to be people being let go. And they're doing it to avoid, repetitive positions in the company, because they're going to be utilizing some of the UFC marketing team and design team and things like that. So it's unfortunate. We've talked about this quite a bit, but the biggest thing here is that we're actually getting closer and closer to this happening. And you really got to just wonder if this is going to, if this is at one point going to reach the roster, right? And of course, you don't want to see people lose their jobs or anything like that. It's unfortunate, but this happens with every merger, and it happened with Warner Bros. Discovery. It happens with all of these big corporate mergers, and it's just so unfortunate. So I definitely understand why people would be having a very negative feeling in the company offices. But then I also wonder too, like with WWE headquarters, and then you got the UFC and Endeavor, I wonder if they're just going to do one massive headquarters, or if they're going to keep this building, if they're going to what they're going to do. It's a very, very interesting situation when you think about it. And genuinely speaking, I really do feel bad for people that are going to lose their job with this, because it's unfortunate, and it's not their fault. Sometimes it's not even performance based. Sometimes it's just a game of who's been here the longest, or financially where it makes the most sense, or whatever it may be. So it's just definitely unfortunate, but I'll keep you guys updated along the way, especially if it starts touching on the rosters. And guys, final story of the day, WWE may have canceled WWE NXT Level Up. Last night, WWE did not tape NXT Level Up after the NXT live show. And it's a really weird thing, because WWE typically tapes Level Up after NXT, and the idea of this is to put it on the WWE Network around the same time that Rampage is on. Keep in mind, on the WWE Network or Peacock or whatever it may be, the numbers, nobody knows the numbers. Nobody knows the live stream attendance. Nobody knows any of that. Nobody knows how many people are watching live, how many people are watching DVR. Only WWE and the NBC executives know this. Debbie at Wrestling in 60 Seconds reached out to me. She let me know that yesterday there was no NXT Level Up, but they did do a couple matches with students. And actually, what was really interesting, because I looked on X, Twitter, and I seen a lot of people talk about Brie Covington. So she had a match, and a lot of people are praising it. And you might notice this sometimes with NXT Level Up. There are some really good matches on there. And typically NXT Level Up is for the people who haven't debuted on TV, people who are coming out of those NIL deals. And sometimes you have some NXT mainstays on there. But, you know, the thing is, nobody really knows what's happening here. WWE decided not to tape it, but they still did dark matches. That might be the WWE formula going forward, because if you're not taping, then the good news is you're saving money in that aspect while still giving people the ability to wrestle those dark matches and get in front of an audience. We'll see what happens here, but it almost looks like NXT Level Up could in fact be canceled, and we'll have to see for sure what happens. But I want to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I appreciate you guys all for watching, and I will see you next time right here on The Ango Show.